On December 7, 1941, just 10 miles off Oahu's coast, Lieutenant Mochitsura Hashimoto stood aboard the Imperial Japanese Navy submarine I-24. In the early morning darkness, he watched intently as a midget submarine quietly slipped away toward Pearl Harbor. Hours later, as flames devoured Battleship Row and thick smoke darkened the Hawaiian sky, Japanese officers across the Pacific rejoiced. They believed they had delivered a crippling blow to the United States, an industrial giant deemed invincible by their own strategists. Aboard I-24, Hashimoto and his fellow officers radiated confidence, convinced that American naval power was shattered forever. They placed unwavering faith in the technological superiority of Japanese weapons, particularly the Type 93 long-lance torpedo, a marvel of engineering that outclassed anything in the Allied arsenal. Yet, within the burning wreckage of Pearl Harbor lay the seeds of Japan's ultimate defeat. The weapon that would unravel their empire was already loaded into American submarines, flawed, dismissed by Japanese intelligence as proof of American inferiority, but destined to power the most devastating submarine campaign in naval history. The story of Japan's downfall was not written in the spectacular carrier battles that would dominate headlines, but in the grinding technical failures of American torpedoes, which, once corrected, would strangle Japan's war economy. This tale of mutual misunderstanding and technological contempt began long before the first bombs fell on Pearl Harbor. On May 13, 1940, a mysterious walk-in source, whose identity remains classified, delivered a stunning intelligence report to the U.S. Naval Attaché in Tokyo. The report detailed the Type 93 oxygen torpedo, later nicknamed the Long Lance by Allied forces. This weapon was a triumph of Japanese engineering, boasting a range of 22,000 yards at 48 knots or 33,000 yards at slower speeds, with a warhead packed with 1,080 pounds of high explosive. Accompanied by technical drawings and operational doctrine, the report explained how Japanese destroyers and cruisers would deploy the Long Lance in night surface engagements, leveraging its range and stealth to devastating effect. The Office of Naval Intelligence meticulously reviewed the report and sent it to the Bureau of Ordnance for technical evaluation. The response was a catastrophic misjudgment. The Bureau dismissed the intelligence outright. Their reasoning was rooted in prejudice. Japanese engineers, they argued, could not possibly have developed a torpedo surpassing American designs. The use of pure oxygen as an oxidizer, while theoretically feasible, was deemed too dangerous and complex for an Asian naval power to master safely. The report was filed away, forgotten, setting the stage for a deadly intelligence failure. This dismissal was not an isolated error but part of a broader Western contempt for Japanese capabilities. In 1940, Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner, who would later earn 4 Navy Crosses in the Pacific, testified before Congress that Japanese pilots were inherently inferior due to supposed racial traits affecting their vision and spatial awareness. These claims, presented as scientific fact, suggested Japanese aviators lacked the night vision or technical skill for effective combat. Similarly, Army Air Corps intelligence in 1941 asserted that the Mitsubishi Zero fighter was a derivative of obsolete American designs, incapable of challenging U.S. aircraft. These assumptions, steeped in racism, were shattered in the war's opening months, when Japanese pilots flying superior Zeros and employing sophisticated tactics dominated the skies over the Philippines' Wake Island and the Dutch East Indies, inflicting heavy losses on unprepared Allied forces. The consequences of this intelligence failure emerged swiftly after Pearl Harbor. 7 American cruisers, Quincy, Vincennes, Astoria, Chicago, and Northampton among them, were sunk by Type 93 torpedoes during the Pacific War. 9 destroyers and the fleet carrier Hornet also fell victim, often struck from ranges the Allies believed impossible. Over 3,100 American sailors perished, many on ships that thought themselves safely beyond torpedo range. The Battle of the Java Sea on February 27, 1942, laid bare this miscalculation. Dutch Rear Admiral Karel Doorman led a multinational force of American, British, Dutch, and Australian ships to intercept a Japanese invasion convoy bound for Java. Plagued by language barriers, differing tactical doctrines, and exhausted crews, Doorman's force was no match for the cohesive Japanese fleet. At 1600 hours, visual contact was made, and by 1633, the Japanese light cruiser Naka launched 4 Type 93 torpedoes from 15,000 yards. Destroyers followed with 27 more, and the heavy cruiser Haguro added 8 from an astonishing 22,000 yards. These torpedoes, running at 12 feet with no visible wake due to their oxygen propulsion, struck without warning. At 1713 hours, a long lance hit the Dutch destroyer Kortenaer, its half-ton warhead breaking her back. She sank in under 2 minutes, taking most of her 150-man crew. Allied commanders, unable to comprehend torpedo attacks from such distances, assumed submarines were responsible, disrupting their formations as they maneuvered to counter non-existent threats. By the battle's end, 2 light cruisers, 3 destroyers, and 2,300 Allied sailors were lost, while Japan suffered only minor damage. The invasion of Java proceeded unimpeded, the pattern repeated at the Battle of Savo Island on August 9, 1942, one of the U.S. Navy's worst defeats. Japanese float planes dropped flares, illuminating Allied ships. Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa's force, with 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and a destroyer, launched torpedoes from extreme ranges. In 32 minutes, the Australian cruiser Canberra and U.S. cruisers Quincy, Vincennes, and Astoria were sunk, with Chicago's bow blown off. Over 1,000 sailors died, many trapped in burning wrecks. Survivors reported torpedoes striking from impossible distances, leaving no wakes. But intelligence officers dismissed these as combat confusion, insisting Japanese torpedoes were only marginally better than American ones. Meanwhile, Japanese intelligence mirrored this arrogance, underestimating American submarines based on their early failures. On December 14, 1941, the submarine Seawolf fired 8 Mark 14 torpedoes at a stationary Japanese freighter off Mindanao. 7 missed, passing beneath the target, and the 8th struck without detonating. On December 24, Sargo fired 12 torpedoes at 4 cargo ships off Indochina, all failing to hit or explode despite perfect conditions. Japanese intelligence, intercepting radio traffic and interrogating survivors, concluded American torpedoes were primitive and submariners poorly trained. This led Japan to prioritize battleships and carriers for a decisive battle, neglecting convoy protection and anti-submarine warfare, a decision that would prove disastrous. The Mark 14 torpedo, designed during the Great Depression, suffered 3 catastrophic flaws. It ran 10-11 feet deeper than set, its magnetic exploder was unreliable, and its contact exploder failed at high impact velocities. Intended for new fleet submarines like Gado and Wahoo, the Mark 14 was ambitious, 20 feet 6 inches long, 3,000 pounds, with a 643-pound Torpex warhead, achieving 4,500 yards at 46 knots or 9,000 yards at 31.5 knots. Its Mark 6 exploder, designed to detonate beneath a ship's keel using magnetic fields, was untested in combat conditions due to budget constraints. Testing used dummy warheads, masking weight distribution issues. The depth control ran too deep because the hydrostatic sensor, affected by water flow at high speeds, was never recalibrated after adding 80 pounds to the warhead. The magnetic exploder, calibrated for Rhode Island's magnetic field, failed in the Pacific, either detonating prematurely or not at all. The contact exploder's firing pin, designed for slower torpedoes, jammed at 46 knots, especially on direct hits, a flaw overlooked from earlier designs. In 1942, American submarines fired 1,442 torpedoes, claiming 201 ships but sinking only 109, totaling 4,871 tons. Commanders reported torpedoes running too deep, exploding early, or failing to detonate. yet the Bureau of Ordnance blamed operator error. Japanese merchant ships arrived in port with unexploded torpedoes lodged in their hulls, reinforcing Japan's belief that American submarines posed no threat. This led to minimal convoy escorts, with resources diverted to capital ships. The crisis reached a breaking point in mid-1943. On June 10th, the submarine trigger fired 6 torpedoes at the carrier Hio. Only 2 detonated, allowing Hio to escape with moderate damage. On July 24th, Tinosa fired 15 torpedoes at the 19,250-ton Tonan Maru No. 3, a vital whale oil transport. 9 hit without exploding, despite ideal conditions. Rear Admiral Charles Lockwood, commander of Submarines Pacific, ordered tests that revealed the contact exploder's firing pin jammed at high velocities. Engineers, inspired by lightweight Japanese propeller alloys from Pearl Harbor wreckage, redesigned the firing pin with aluminum. By September 1943, modified torpedoes reached the fleet, correcting all defects. The transformation was staggering. In 1944, submarines fired 6,092 torpedoes, sinking 492 ships for 288,000 tons, a tenfold increase in effectiveness. Submarines like Flasher and Barb devastated Japanese shipping. On December 22, 1944, Flasher sank 3 tankers totaling 28,000 tons in one attack. Barb, in 1945, sank 17 ships for 96,000 tons, a record. By January 1945, Japan's merchant fleet was reduced to a quarter of its 1941 strength. Oil, steel, and food imports collapsed, shutting down refineries, steel mills, and aircraft factories. Naval vessels sat idle, and Army garrisons starved as supply ships sank. The Type 93, once a terror, became irrelevant by 1944. American radar, tactics, and air power neutralized its threat. At the Battle of the Philippine Sea, submarines Cavalla and Albacore sank carriers Shokaku and Taiho, crippling Japanese naval aviation. At Leyte Gulf, submarines Darter and Dace sank 2 cruisers and crippled a third, disrupting Admiral Kurita's command. Japan's navy, immobilized by fuel shortages, ceased to function. By August 1945, Japan's merchant marine was nearly extinct, with submarines sinking 3 times the tonnage Japan could build monthly. The economic collapse, not carrier battles or atomic bombs, defeated Japan.